Hi, how's it going? This is Resident of Collarwood for YouTube, back with another Dark Shadows video for you guys and gals. And I'm here to talk about, or we'll continue to talk about, House of Dark Shadows. It's real simple when you look at House of Dark Shadows and go through the characters. So I'm here on Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. And yes, I do mean Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. That's the one similarity that this character will have with the series character, that they do give Elizabeth the full name of Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. Now, why do I think they do? I just think they do it. It's much simpler. It's like, why add any confusion? We could look. We could say that if Paul Stoddard exists in this timeline, which I gotta believe he does, just because there's a Paul Stoddard doesn't necessarily mean there's a Jason McGuire. It sort of gets into, you could add the question of, this is literally a parallel time Dark Shadows, because this has not only has nothing to do with the series, but this is so different than the series. We could literally say that Paul Stoddard could be anything, or could be anyone from a standpoint of, what I mean by anyone, he doesn't necessarily have to be a con artist in the movie. We don't know much about Paul Stoddard from the movie standpoint. And we're not going to know, and no, we're not meant to know. To put it shortly, who gives a damn? Me, anyway, um, I do, Your Honor. But for time's sake, we have to look at Elizabeth Collins Stoddard for who she is in the House of Dark Shadows movie. Is she still the matriarch? Yes, in every way she does the hiring and firing. But I want to mention something that I somewhat mentioned in Roger's retrospective. She's that I'm going to at least mention, or I'm pretty sure I did Roger already. If I had, yeah, I did Roger already. Something I'm going to mention that I think I mentioned in Roger, but I'm going to mention here if I didn't. Roger has firing power too. This isn't the series, and House of Dark Shadows lets you know that pretty quickly with Roger firing Willie Loomis. Um, it's that simple. I mean, look, they still expected Willie to return and collect his paycheck. God, they're not ignorant, but Roger did fire hit Willie in the movie. So that is key. That's something I'm going to touch upon when I get to the Willie retrospective. No, he's not next. Uh, I wish he was. I'll tell you who's next here after a bit. With Elizabeth, is she does she still care about David the way she does in the series? I'm going to say yes. And that's another similarity. So you might say, well, why is it this Elizabeth, the Elizabeth for the series? Because, well, it's because of one thing. She just isn't, number one. And number two, she, keep in mind, the series, what really makes the series separate from the movie is also the events. These events in the movie, I've talked about this with Christine and Kara. Shout out to them. I'll leave a link to their channel in the description box, Between the Shadows, the Dark Shadows podcast. That you, in the beginning of the movie, you don't get an. It's not what you just what you do hear in the music. It's what you don't hear in the series. You always heard, but way before the music, you heard a voiced over intro by an actor or actress. For the longest time, it was done by Alexander Mulkey Isles from the beginning episodes. That would eventually change. Sometime during the 1795 arc, I believe that had changed. Also, probably prior to that, I think slightly prior to that, it had changed. Um, with this, that with the movie, you don't get a voiceover at all. And also with Elizabeth herself, she does care about David, but she's not. How do I put this? Her and Roger's interaction about David is very brief, and it's not it's not quite that we're gonna get into this heated conversation. Roger doesn't want to deal with it right now. But again, in the course of a movie, you're not gonna get a lot of character development. But this cold just won't go away. Um, but what I'll say is what you do get from Elizabeth is one of the most shocking aspects of a mother and how a mother is dealing with her daughter's death. What I love most about Elizabeth in this movie is she is not trying to hook her daughter up in this movie. Her daughter is already hooked up and engaged to a man. Todd Blake, played by Donald Briscoe. I covered the character Todd Blake prior to this. Keep in mind that in the series, and this is another why it's different too, Elizabeth wanted Carolyn to marry Joe. She did everything in her power to want to make that happen. You could sort of make the case that Joan is just a way, way nicer version of Joshua. But difference is though, she actually gives a shit. She's not doing it for money or she just wants her daughter to be married and happy and not be alone. In the movie, she's not interfering with her daughter's relationship at all. And that is a big, big character shift. If you're looking for the biggest difference, look at how she's not interfering with her daughter's relationship within the course of this movie when Carolyn's alive. There's no hands on approach. And that is a huge difference from the series. It's a huge, huge departure. And it's not a bad departure either. I mean, look, if you're Dan Curtis, you're wanting these characters to only resemble the characters from the series by name only. That job has been done. That's something you're going to pick up. If you haven't picked up already, you will pick up here in these retrospectives that these characters are by name only. They're characters in the series in a sense. They're not the characters from a characteristic standpoint. If this were Elizabeth from the series, I'm not saying she wouldn't approve of Todd, but she would have something to say about it. And she says nothing really about, you know, she doesn't intervene in it. She doesn't say, "Oh, I disapprove." No, none of that. There's no like, "Oh, I think they should go get married, have 20 kids." There's none of that either. Um, and Carolyn, by the way, is going to leave for England. You don't hear, later on that year, I think, or next year, you don't hear Elizabeth putting a kibosh on it. No, she just, hey, whatever Carolyn wants to do, she can do. This is a very free spirited Elizabeth in many ways. And you sort of love to see that. Now, where that all comes crashing down is the death of Carolyn. The death of Carolyn really shakes Joan's character in this movie and why not. By the way, the funeral sequence, Carolyn's, is one of my favorite scenes in House of Dark Shadows. It's one of the coolest scenes because you got Jerry Lacey reading a eulogy. It's Jerry goddamn Lacey. It's so goddamn awesome. He's the man. Jerry Lacey is the best preacher there was, is, and will be. And yes, I took the Bret Hart monologue and applied it to Jerry Lacey. You're welcome. Uh, as a preacher, as a priest, he's the best trash there ever was, is, or will be. 1,000%. No, he's not my next one either. I'll get into my next one here in a bit. With Elizabeth, is there anybody interested in Elizabeth? Here's your hint. Here's my next one. Yeah, Sheriff Oh my god, the um, the sheriff in House of Dark Shadows. Oh my god. Uh, I'm gonna remember not remember the sheriff's name, and it's the same name they use in the series. So I'm gonna kick myself hard. Um, oh my god, what's his name? Uh, this is what it is when you take Dana Elker and you don't have him for the movie. And I don't get me wrong, I love for who they have. I love that the fact that they have Dennis Patrick for the character, but Dana Elker is who I envision for the character. Anytime I'm watching Dark Shadows, no matter what. Um, George something. Oh my God. Oh, George Patterson, Sheriff Patterson. God, how did I not remember? God, I'm getting old. Age. Sheriff Patterson is going to be my next character retrospective. Yeah, I'll make sure to remember his name. I'll have Julie write it down for me, or somebody will write it down for me. I'll write it down if I have to. Um, Sheriff Patterson is my next character retrospective. Why, you might ask? I talk about how characters interact with one another, and I'll get back to the whole Carolyn thing in a minute. There's an brief interaction between Sheriff Patterson and Elizabeth, and you can tell Sheriff Patterson has some sort of feeling for Liz in the movie, and I love it. Considering that it's Dennis Patrick playing the character, and you can appreciate that, makes you feel all warm inside before the murdering and killing starts, before the shit hits the fan. Barnabas starts killing people pretty frequently toward the end of the movie. He's an antagonist in the movie. I mean, come on. Um, Back to the whole Carol thing. What really shakes Elizabeth is not only Carolyn's resurrection as a vampire, but staking Carolyn and finding out that Carolyn has been, this really sends Liz into a deep sort of dark state of depression. How the some of these characters in Dark Shadows were not prepared for the supernatural. They were not ready for the supernatural to interact with the living. And I think that's the biggest difference too with the characters. Elizabeth in the series knew about the supernatural. She you know she might have not wanted to believe certain aspects of it, but she knew it was out there. With this Elizabeth finds it is so shell shocked by the events of, hey, there's a vampire. My daughter was killed by a vampire. Now my daughter rises from the grave, becomes a vampire. She gets staked in the heart. Going through that process, you see Joan Bennett and you feel sitting there, silence, and her face says it all. My God, it's like, how can you not feel sorry for this woman? Keep in mind, Joan Bennett was a movie star in the 30s and 40s in the gangster film era. She was in some. Um, great actress. And then people say Dark Shadows resurrected her career. It did, but here's the thing: her name brought an anchor ship to the show Dark Shadows. She was a big name to get. Um, though she may not have been as big as she was still one of the most recognizable names when it came to a veteran actress of somebody who was a major movie star. So Joan being in a movie is nothing new. Now, is this specifically a Joan Bennett movie? No, it's not. In fact, you'd have to. Has, what's the movie? Hereditary is more her movie. So if you want to watch the original Hereditary of Joan Bennett, that's the one. House of Dark Shadows. Yeah, she's in this movie. Make no mistake. And her character, again, each character has a focus point in the movie. Some a little more than others. And with Joan's character, you do get enough of a focus to understand the character. That's what I'll say about each of the characters I'm discussing. Now, again, Some characters get more of a focus than others, like our buddy Barnabas, because he's the main attraction of the movie. Um, so Joan's character finally snaps out of her coma, and long enough to see Dr. Julia Hoffman get bit, get taken care of. If really, 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 just crazy business. And so that happens, and you really have this moment of the character, Elizabeth. Now, I want to be clear about something. Some people might say, well, did Joan Bennett's character get like messed with in the series? Yeah, absolutely. And I don't mean just by Jason McGuire. The Phoenix arc, they tumbled her down the last couple steps. They had her fall, or they at least had her fall at the foot of the stairs, one or the other. Um, so I mean, they didn't play it safe with Elizabeth's character, with Joan's character in the series, and they definitely damn sure don't play it safe with the movie. In the movie, it's just, and I'll say this to close it. In the movie, it's like, who the hell is safe? And I mean that. It's just, when you're watching House of Dark Shadows, it's like, okay, who's next? Next body, please. Next body. Because so Dennis Patrick's George Patterson is next for my retrospective. I'll remember the name, I promise. And it's a very interesting retrospective, I promise you that, because it's going to be fun to look at this character and how it really differs from the series George Patterson, not just in look either. All right, guys, you have a good night and take care.